Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now there isn't much to be found online about the Celeron 420, this 10-year-old single-core, single-threaded CPU. In fact, I only bought it because it cost me 25 British pence, around 35 cents, and it was the cheapest processor I could find online anywhere, from every used component retailer I searched. Digging around online, and it seems there are a few discussions regarding overclocking on various forums, which made me wonder just how far we could push this thing. With a stock clock speed of 1.6 GHz and a 512 KB L2 cache, it isn't very good at all even by today's lowest end standards, and it wasn't very good when it released in 2007. But as always, there is method behind the madness, because this single core chip helps represent a tiny part of the modern gaming community that still uses a single core processor for gaming, according to the most recent Steam hardware survey. In fact, 1.36% of you out there still use one physical core, up 0.03% from last month. Granted, this is a very small percentage, but it's a larger percentage than that of the 8-core users. That doesn't mean this Celeron is actually capable of much though, and as far as single-core CPUs are concerned, this is still one of the worst ones you could buy, not just for running games, but for everyday usage too. If we quickly jump into a few titles before trying to overclock it, you'll see how it pretty much maxes out at 100% usage, even when paired with an old HD 5750 budget graphics card. It will be a similar story with most modern titles, but older and some less demanding games will still run fine, albeit with that huge bottleneck in place. I mean, for 25p I shouldn't complain, but it would definitely be worth spending a few more pennies to find an old Core 2 Duo or even Pentium D if you wanted a super low cost 775 socket PC. But back to overclocking, can we make this Celeron 420 a little more bearable to use, and just how far can we push it? Let's find out. So the first thing I did was crank up the CPU speed slowly in the BIOS of our Asus P5NE SLI board, gradually working the clock speed up to 2.2 GHz, and then this happened. All was going so well, but I switched off the system and started again, and as it turned out, the maximum overclock for our Celeron seems to be 2.16 GHz. Anything higher and we see the same crash. That's an extra 500 and a bit megahertz over the stock speeds, and as far as it would go. It stayed pretty cool at 34 degrees idle though, up from 28. Jumping back into Windows and we immediately shaved 5 seconds off of our boot time, though that's negligible when it takes about 50 from pressing the button to turn on. Would we see a difference in games though? And if so, how much? The footage is recorded on a camera today because trying to set up any recording software was quite a pain with this thing, but at least this method didn't hinder performance in any way. Exploring the outside area of Megaton in Fallout 3 first, and with our stock Celeron the average was 20 FPS with the low settings and 720p resolution. All gameplay shown here is from the overclocked CPU. So did we see any improvement? Well, yes we did. The game's average shot up to 27 and even touched on 30 and above on some occasions. It actually felt smoother too because of the improvement of the percentile figures. We also saw a nice improvement on Cuphead, which saw an increase over the average of 30 with the 1.6 GHz Celeron to 40 when overclocked. Not ideal because of the stutter, but a much improved experience over the original half hour of gameplay. Modern Warfare single player saw a little boost from 25 frames per second to 30 as well, although this level was especially demanding and caused some significant slowdown with this setup. It's probably not playable, especially in multiplayer, but it's still an improvement nonetheless. Skyrim fared the worst before our overclock with just 10 frames per second at 720p, so how did it differ here? Well, it didn't really, with a 12 FPS average. This could have been entirely coincidental because the game exhibited the same frame drops, and running the test a second time returned 11 on average, so no real change. Finally, it's Minecraft. The frame rate here was all over the place before, although the average was reported as 32. The drops and stutter made it unplayable though, and this is something that hasn't gone away, although the average has now increased to a reported 41. Once again, not much difference when it comes to the gameplay itself because it's still an unplayable mess, but there is definitely an improvement in some titles. Cinebench R15 scored 38 if you're wondering, although as you can see I was waiting a while for that result, and general usage didn't really feel all that much faster, but navigating the Windows desktop did and programs opened a little quicker. Overall, there are a few CPUs I've seen costing less than £1 or dollar, ones that are quicker than this, but this was the only one in stock at the time at this price, and it's probably one of the slowest I've ever used. There's no real reason to buy a single core CPU anymore, even for retro game builds, because Core 2 Duos and AMD Athlons are equally as cheap, though if you want something to practice overclocking with, something just for fun, well, let's just say I couldn't think of many better ways to spend your pocket change. Thank you for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like on it. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and you want to, of course, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.